Ukraine has highlighted the importance of its presence at peace talks to end Russian aggression as senior Trump administration officials seek to sit down with their Russian counterparts in Saudi Arabia for related talks this week. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello, hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching Monday's edition of Press Perspective for February 17th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Ukraine and Europe are calling for a seat at the table as the U.S. and Russia seek to start peace talks to end the Kremlin's invasion of Kyiv. For more on this, I have Chloe Borgnon, a correspondent for France 24 here in the studio. Chloe, it's great to have you back.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
I also have Professor Choi Hyun Jin at Kyung Hee University with us virtually. Professor Choi, welcome to the program.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Right, we'll start here in the studio. Chloe, let's begin with details of the speech given by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at this year's Munich Security Conference.
Yeah, so at Munich Security Conference is the gathering of the world top leaders for policymakers. He made a speech on Saturday, so this weekend. First thing that he said, he wanted the United States not to go behind the back, and I'm quoting him, behind the back of Ukraine to make a peace treaty or any truce talks with Russia. He said that Ukraine would never accept this kind of deal made without their involvement. He's saying that mostly because Donald Trump has been talking with Vladimir Putin on the phone, and he said that he could be meeting soon with the Russian leader to start speaking about any peace truce and a peace treaty. Zelensky also asked for security guarantees from the U.S. and Europe to make sure that if a peace treaty was to be made with Russia, to be sure that Russia would not overpass this and attack Ukraine again. And he also asked Europe to find its own voice regarding their own security. And he said, for example, that they should create their own continental army, so separate from NATO, where the US is also included. He said that it is the end of the time when the US would help Europe just because they have always done so.
Right, and Professor Choi, as Chloe just mentioned, President Zelensky, he has called for the creation, and I quote, of an armed forces of Europe to ensure security. How do you respond to this suggestion?
Yes, it is true that President Zelensky proposed to create a new European army. And I think there is a growing concern about European security. And especially the President Zelensky is worried that NATO might not be enough to stop future aggression by Russia. And this concern is very understandable, especially with Russia now increasing its military presence in Belarus. But unfortunately, this proposal, I think, is not really realistic, or this is impossible in the near future. There are some reasons. The first, not all European countries agree with this idea. For example, Poland and the Baltic states, they tend to strongly support a close military cooperation among European countries. But on the other hand, other major European nations such as Germany and France may prefer to strengthen NATO instead of creating a new continental army. And NATO has been the key to European security for decades. So changing this system would require a lot of agreement and also negotiation among NATO members. And secondly, there's also some practical problem. A new European army would need a new command structure, military training, and also a large defense budget. NATO already has this system in place. But building a new army from scratch would take many years to prepare this kind of a system. But still, Zelensky's proposal has some importance from diplomatic point of view, because he wanted to push European countries to work more closely for their defense. But instead of creating a completely new army, it is more realistic at this stage to strengthen European military cooperation within the framework of NATO. So I think the important question is not whether Europe should replace NATO, but how European countries can strengthen their defense cooperation.
Right. Meanwhile, Chloe, ahead of his address at the Munich Security Conference, President Zelensky sat down with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. What has been disclosed about that particular discussion?
Yeah, so very few details actually have been disclosed from both sides. It was an awaited talk after, again, the Trump and Putin phone call. It was a good talk, according to J.D. Vance, something that Volodymyr Zelensky also agreed on. Vance called the discussion fruitful, and he reminded everyone about the U.S. stance. That is, they want to get a global, lasting, durable peace in the area. They say that they don't want to strike a deal only to get a new war in the area, in the Eastern Europe area, in a few years. So that's the main point that he made. Volodymyr Zelensky, on his side, again, did not disclose a lot either. What he said is he wanted this discussion to be fruitful as well, to be able to prepare for discussion and for talks with Russia regarding negotiations for a peace treaty. And he said again that he needed real security guarantees from the US. That's something he also, again, said on Saturday in his speech. So that's probably the main point that Ukraine has been trying to convey at that Munich conference this weekend.
Right. Chloe, before we go any further, though, do remind us about the differing conditions for peace as shared by Ukraine and those shared by, previously that is, by Russia, as well as those recently hinted by the US through its Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, so that's quite a lot of things. So I'll try to keep as short as possible. So regarding Russia, the latest we got was from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Russia, who say that all of Putin's conditions should be met before any peace treaty can go on. So Vladimir Putin's condition, he explained them on the 14th of June on 2024, so he's not been coming back on it at all. There is a few things. He said that the Ukrainian troops should withdraw from the territory of the 4 Ukrainian territories that have been controlled, mostly controlled at least, by the Russian troops at the moment. He also asked for Ukraine to give away their ambition to join NATO. There is also a more global agenda as well. Obviously, Russia would like NATO to be a bit less strong in the area, to have an area of influence around Russia where NATO would not be there too much, also trying to, deter a bit the European countries from being too strong in their own defense and weapons. Ukraine, the main point for them, and they are followed there by quite a few European allies, is no deal on Ukraine without Ukraine. So that's their main stress at the moment, the thing that they're stressing the most at the moment. They also ask for the United States to maintain their current military support. So Volodymyr Zelensky said that Ukraine can't do it without the US help in this war against Russia. And security guarantees that Moscow won't start a war again. So Volodymyr Zelensky spoke about a peace through strength against Russia. For the United States, let's just speak about the newest things that happened. So Donald Trump said that it is time to make a drug deal. He really wants it to happen now, but it might be hard to get Vladimir Putin to the table of negotiations because he feels like he's winning the war at the moment. So having the upper end, he doesn't want to come down and negotiate anything. And we saw that Donald Trump wants Ukraine to give money back to the US. So he wants to strike a rare earth minerals deal with Ukraine to kind of pay back the military financial help that they've been giving to Ukraine. It was interesting. I read an article by Sean Monaghan from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and he said that for anything to be achieved, US should actually try to go for a smaller deal at first with Russia. So maybe not getting Ukraine into NATO or getting the territories from before 2014, before the Crimea invasion, but maybe go for smaller achievement like local ceasefires, humanitarian corridors, or demilitarized zone, because according to him, the conflict has been going on so long now that they have to go slow and small bites to be able to get anything, any deal struck between Ukraine and Russia.
Right. And Professor Choi, some analysts believe Mr. Putin has been garnering major diplomatic wins amid the return of Mr. Trump. They point out that Putin was the first to speak with Trump about the war in Ukraine and that he may be the first to sit down with Trump about the same issue. Now, during the former Biden administration, Putin was a pariah, but now with the return of the Trump administration, the BBC claims that Putin looks to become a potential partner for the U.S. Should the world, Professor Choi, be worried?
Unfortunately, it is somehow true that President Putin has made some diplomatic gains with the return of Donald Trump. The very fact that Donald Trump spoke with Putin before contacting President Zelensky on February 13 sends an important message. It suggests that Russia now has a more direct communication channel with the United States, something that was nearly impossible under the previous Biden administration. However, this does not, there's an important question. Does this mean the world should be deeply worried? I think the answer to this question depends on how these talks develop in the future. Putin is now trying to position himself as a key negotiator, but his ultimate goal is not just a ceasefire, but what he wants is to reshape European security, weaken NATO, and also ensure Ukraine remain under the Russian influence. If Donald Trump moves in that direction, then yes, the world should be deeply worried. However, at the same time, it is important to remember that the diplomatic wins do not always translate into strategic victories. Putin still faces strong resistance from European leaders who insist that any deal with Russia must include Ukraine, and also they want to protect European security during this negotiation process. And even in the United States, there is a limit to how much Donald Trump can shift its foreign policy without facing opposition from U.S. Congress and also the military. So while Putin has gained some diplomatic momentum, his ability to fully achieve his goal is still uncertain. The key question is not whether he has gained some influence, but whether the United States and its allies in Western Europe will allow Mr. Putin to reshape the balance of power in Europe.
Right. That being said then, Chloe, prior to actually sitting down with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, he raised quite a bit of eyebrows by attacking Europe about free speech and democracy. Now, this attack, of course, was quickly rebuked by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz the following day. Could you walk us through this heated interaction between the two sides and, of course, their broader implications?
Yeah, so J.D. Vance was awaited on Ukraine. He gave very little on that, but instead he decided to give a lesson on democracy towards his European allies. So, as you said, some experts have been saying that it was actually a very confrontational speech and a direct effort to influence European politics. Just to give you 2 points that he's raised among the many that he made, he first of all was unhappy with the censoring of conservative and right-wing parties and views in Europe. So, for example, he called for Germany to let down the firewall and allow alternative for Germany, alternative for Deutschland, so AfD, that's a right-wing party, like extreme right-wing party, to enter the federal government in the next elections. He also said that restriction on free speech in Europe were a greater threat to Europe than military aggression from Russia or from China. So there he was directly pointing at the fact that hateful speech is not authorized and should be watched upon, especially on social medias. So it did not get a good reception from the room on the day of the speech. Some observers say that many people in attendance did not, stayed seated actually when he finished his speech and did not raise to applaud him, which was kind of expected when the speech was that confrontational. So as you said, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz answered to him in the form of a speech on the next day. Why Germany has been especially keen to answer to him is that they are having a major election in the coming days, and the far-right party, Alternative for the Deutschland party, that has been backed by Elon Musk, by the way, is at the moment second in position in the polls. So that's why Germany also felt a need to answer directly. He said, first of all, Olaf Scholz, that Germany rejects outsiders intervening in our democracy, and he said that it was not appropriate, especially for friends and allies, to do so. He reminded that there was good reason not to work with the AfD, so that's again a far-right ultranationalist politics party. And he reminded also GD Vance that European democracies are actually built from a time when people and politicians noticed that it is possible for democracy to get disturbed and to be destroyed actually by anti-democrat movements. So that's why they don't want to make any compromise. The New York Times was saying, an interesting bit was saying that there was growing unease among European leaders after this GD Vance speech, especially on their relationship actually with the United States, and that on the Saturday sessions on security at the Munich conference, most of the people or European who were taking, making speeches, decided to do that to react predominantly negatively to what GD Vance has said, and most generally to Trump agendas on Europe.
Right, and staying with what Chloe has just said, Professor Choi, Mr. Vance, he also met with a German far-right leader while in Munich for the annual security forum. Now, in recent years, Professor Choi, there has been a bit of concern about the rise of the far-right becoming a global phenomenon. How do you explain this phenomenon?
There are some the regions. I can suggest some three regions that can explain this trend. The first is about economy. The economic problem have made many people frustrated. After the global financial crisis in 2007 through 2009, and also COVID-19 pandemic, income inequality has increased, and many working class people feel ignored and also weakened. This economic concern helps far-right parties gain political support because they provide a simple solution to complex problems. For example, they say like this: we can protect local jobs by reducing immigration. It sounds very simple. And secondly, immigration has caused strong political reactions. And in many Western countries, fast population changes make people worry about their national identity. So some far-right parties use this fear to gain support by opposing immigration and also promoting nationalism. And we can see this clearly in Europe, for example, with the parties like Germany's AfD and also France's National Rally. And third, trust in mainstream politicians is decreasing nowadays. So many people think traditional parties are corrupt, ineffective, or disconnected from real-life problems. The far-right movements present themselves as outsiders who can fight for the people against these old elites. And this is why leaders like Donald Trump in the United States and also Viktor Orban in Hungary have gained popularity among people. So, however, far-right movements also faces some resistance. In Germany, for example, mainstream parties have created a so-called firewall against AfD. And also in some cases, when far-right parties actually win the election, they sometimes struggle to govern well. So, and this kind of limitation can weaken their long-term success possibility. So while this trend is important, I don't think this is necessarily permanent.
Right. Meanwhile, Chloe, back on Ukraine. Now, early last year, French President Emmanuel Macron suggested having troops in Ukraine. I hear this is now a post-war security option for Ukraine. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, so this is an option so that Europe started looking about a year ago, like in early 2024. Emmanuel Macron was quite alone at the time when he made this option possible. Right now, more and more are following this idea, especially with a new sense of urgency. So right now, like today, Emmanuel Macron has been calling up a meeting for the European leaders in Paris, and one of the advisors of the French president said that there is a necessity for Europe to do more and better for the collective security, so of Europe, but also on the question of Ukraine regarding the stance of the U.S. and saying the stance, mostly the withdrawal of Europe or from any of the United States from any European affairs. So the idea would be mostly to have peacekeepers in Ukraine for after a peace deal with Russia would be struck to make sure that Russia would respect the treaty. There was one of the former commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe who said last month that to do so, it would have to be a real strong army force so that Russians would know that if they ever test it, they would get crushed. And he said that Russia would test the limits, according to him. So that's interesting to see the numbers that could happen. Volodymyr Zelensky was saying that it should be at least 100,000 force strong. Some media, European medias, were reporting on mostly like 30,000 to 40,000 troops, army troops from all of the different countries of Europe that would participate. There is no confirmation on either. Emmanuel Macron was interviewed in the Financial Times on the question, and for now he said that deploying a huge force is, and I'm quoting him, far-fetched. So the question would be, how much is Europe and European countries ready to engage on a war terrain that's still boiling at the moment and that, as it now, has not been settled at all?
Right. Well, maybe they will discuss it further at the meeting they're having in Paris. European leaders, a meeting called by French President Emmanuel Macron for this Monday. All right, Chloe, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
And Professor Choi, thank you very much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Right, on that note, we end Monday's edition of Press Perspective. We'll return same time tomorrow with a look at the latest efforts to address North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Thank you for now.